Welcome to No Skinny Cooks. Today we'll be making a seeded loaf of bread. This particular recipe has whole wheat flour and several different kinds of seeds. It's based on a recipe on the King Arthur Flour website. It really drew my eye because of the way it's twisted. It has two braids, one that's plain and the other that's kind of coated in the seed mixture. It also contains molasses, which gives it a really great flavor. Let's get started with the ingredients we'll need to make this bread. The measures I'm going to be giving here are for one loaf, but I'm actually going to be doubling this so that I can make two, one to keep and one to give away. This bread will use both milk and water. 3/4 of a cup of milk, warmed to about 100 degrees, and a half a cup of water, also warmed. 2 tablespoons of butter, melted and cooled. A cup of whole wheat flour. I'm using a great fine whole wheat flour that I get from Israel. I'll place a link in the description. 2.5 cups of bread flour. I'm using King Arthur's bread flour. 2 teaspoons of yeast, either instant or active dry yeast. 1.5 teaspoons of salt. That's 9 grams of salt. It's always better to measure salt if you can, because different kinds of salt will measure very differently if you try to do it by volume. For example, a teaspoon of table salt is much more concentrated than coarse salt. Next, you're going to need a 1/4 cup of molasses. I like to use Steen's dark molasses, and again, I'll place a link to that below. I'm also adding 8 grams of bread improver. This is optional, but it does help homemade bread last a little bit longer. And lastly, we're going to need a 3/4 of a cup of seeds. You can buy these pre-mixed with different types, but I make my own with my favorites, which are black and white sesame seeds, flax seeds, sunflower seeds, and pumpkin seeds. I also want to note that this bread is baked in a long loaf pan. This is a pan that's a little bit narrower, but it's longer than your standard bread pan. I'll be sure to add a link below if you'd like to check them out. This is my first time making this bread right here on this video, so we're going to be learning how to do this together. So I've already whisked all the dry ingredients into the bread flour, and we'll start by adding this to the bowl of my Nutrimal mixer with the bread hook attachment. I'm also adding in the whole wheat flour. Next, I'll turn the mixer on low as I add in the wet ingredients. You'll notice that I learned a lesson here. I should have added the liquids first and then added the flour on top of it. You'll see why in one moment. As I add the water, you'll see why I should have added the liquids first. Because the flour mixture had already started hydrating with the milk and the butter, when I added the water, it didn't want to absorb, and it caused the dough to hang up on my dough hooks. I had to really prod it a bit with my Danish whisk before it started to cooperate. You'll notice here that the dough is really wet. It's really too wet to be workable. Now, I normally don't use all of the water in a recipe because I live in such a humid area. But in this case, I slipped up and I put it all in. So really, before everything is said and done, I'm going to end up adding about a half a cup of whole wheat flour to help absorb some of this extra water. You'll know the dough is getting close to ready when it starts pulling away from the sides of the bowl. It'll start to look smooth. At this point, you'll need to take a quarter cup of your seed mixture and slowly add it into the dough with the mixer running on low speed. I like to pull the dough out and give it some hand kneading when it's almost ready. I just think it's so cool to feel how the dough will almost magically change from a sticky mass to something smooth and silky. This dough will always be a little tacky because of the molasses, but otherwise it came out beautifully and I'm really happy with it. Now it's time for the first proof. You want to put the dough in a lightly greased container, cover it, set it aside for about an hour to an hour and a half until it's about doubled or it's gotten pretty puffy. Remove the dough from the oiled container and cut it into 2 equal halves. Take the 2 pieces of dough and roll them into ropes about 12 inches long. Because the dough is elastic, we'll need to roll it out, let it rest for a second, roll it again. Just keep doing that until you've reached the correct length and the dough stays at that length. Now take one of the ropes and coat it liberally with the seed mixture. Try to really work them into the surface of the dough so that they stay put after baking. Next, we're going to take these two ropes and we're going to twist them together. What we're looking for is to have a nicely defined segment, some with seeds, some without. Once you've done that, pinch and tuck the ends in. Place the finished braid into one of the long loaf pans. Now it's time for the second proof. We're going to take our long loaf pans, we're going to cover them with tea towels or plastic wrap, and we're going to let it sit at room temperature for about an hour. Let it rise however long it takes for the dough to just crest over the edge of the pan about an inch or so. It could take more than an hour. In my case, it took about 2 hours. Around 30 or 45 minutes into your proving time, please put a rack in the middle of your oven and preheat it to 375 degrees. When the loaves have proved for the second time, take them, put them in your preheated 375 degree oven for around 32 to 36 minutes. Since the bread is already a pretty dark color, it can be hard to determine if it's done. So you may want to use a digital thermometer. Insert it into the center of the bread, and if it reads 190 degrees, it's ready to come out. When you take the bread out of the oven, you're going to leave it in the pan for a few minutes, about 5 minutes, so that it can rest. When the 5 minutes are up, now you can remove it from the pan and place it onto the cooling rack. Then once it's cooled completely down, it's time to eat. I think it's really cool the way the seeded and the non-seeded braids look on this bread. As you can see, it wraps all the way around the loaf. So there you have it, a molasses multi-seeded loaf of bread. This thing tastes wonderful, and it really doesn't take much effort to make it. I hope you can give it a try. Let me know in the comments if you do. Likewise, let me know if you subscribed, and if there's something special you'd like to see me try to make. If you haven't subscribed, I'd appreciate it if you did, and hit the notify bell so that you can be informed when new content is added. I try to add something at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. I hope you've enjoyed our journey today. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.